All right.
My name is Tony UC Tony UV. I'm the CEO at VerSprite. And Arshad, I'll let you do your introduction.
Thank you, Tony. Arshad Noor, CTO of Stronky here. Really delighted to be here talking with Tony about multi-factor authentication with FIDO.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's just dive right in because I know that this is a super important topic. One thing that's plagued application users of all types across multiple different industries is password compromises, password security. And now we're faced and presented with a new specification, and that is FIDO 2. So you want to tell us a little bit and just a quick short overview for the audience members out there. What is FIDO? And how does it make it a
Absolutely.
little better?
Absolutely, Tony. So, I mean, everybody in the cybersecurity industry and perhaps even the entire world that uses computers recognizes how bad passwords have become. And the industry has been trying to solve this problem for many decades. Public key cryptography represents one of the best ways forward. And the industry did try to do this more than 25 years ago with public key infrastructure. While it definitely works, it's unfortunately very complex to build, manage, and operate, as well as for developers to integrate into applications. So as the web world just took off like a rocket ship, passwords just went out of control, and a group of very smart people realized that something had to change before the problem just melts down the internet. And they came together in the FIDO Alliance and took another crack at using public key cryptography to solve the authentication problem. And the latest version of their protocol, FIDO 2, represents probably the best implementation of an authentication protocol that solves many, many problems today that I can go into if you want to. But FIDO is probably going to impact your life, whether you like it or not. There are a lot of events that have been happening over the last few months. And even if you don't notice it directly, I can guarantee you FIDO is going to play a big role in your internet computing.
Let's talk about some of these key players that have adopted FIDO. There's some heavy hitters out there that have adopted the spec into their platform.
Right.
You want to share a little bit with our audience in terms of who those are?
Absolutely, sir. About the best announcements that I've seen just in the last 2 weeks is Microsoft announcing Windows 11, where by default, the moment you turn on your brand new laptop, desktop, or upgrade your current desktop laptop with Windows 11, you are going to be using passwordless FIDO. Now, Microsoft calls this Windows Hello, and that's their branding, but underneath the protocol is FIDO. Apple also has made a major announcement at their Worldwide Developer Conference 2 weeks ago, and they announced something called Passkey. Now that's Apple's branding, but the protocol is FIDO 2 once again. Now, besides just these two platforms, the wonderful thing that developers and security people need to know is that every current operating system and every current browser supports FIDO 2 web authentication today. So you don't have to wait for Windows 11. You don't have to wait for Passkey. You can start the process to eliminate passwords from your web and mobile applications today, because there are companies who are already using FIDO and have been using it for the last 3-4 years. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Salesforce.com, GitHub, Namecheap, GoDaddy. I can name at least a dozen companies who have been using FIDO successfully already.
Well, let me answer this question. So let me play the devil's advocate here, and as I'm imagining, some of the audience members looking at this, video, they might be thinking, well, wait a minute, I use Twitter, I use some of these different applications that you're mentioning. I still have to put in my username and password and maybe an MFA component. What does this talk about passwordless?
So you have to understand that FIDO Alliance began life at least 7-8 years ago. And the original implementations of the protocol, there were two of them, one called Universal Second Factor and the second one, Universal Authentication Framework. Now, the reason there were two of them is because there were two heavy hitters who came up with these ideas independently, but decided to join forces in the FIDO Alliance and brought their original protocols. And because the protocols were already well defined and implemented, they decided to go forward and implement them, and some companies deployed them. So for example, Google, they've actually deployed Universal Second Factor, U2F, and Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, GoDaddy, they all have deployed U2F. And U2F was intended to be used as a second factor, the first factor being user ID password. So you still have to log in with your user ID password, but if you have configured your security preferences to use U2F security keys, it will prompt you for your FIDO authentication credential. And unless you have the authenticator, unless you can prove that you are in front of the computer trying to authenticate to that website, you cannot get in. I could give you my Gmail username and password right now, Tony, but you and nobody else will be able to get in because I've got that FIDO security key sitting on my desk. And what happened is UAF was an authentication, passwordless protocol, but it was designed only for mobile devices. It did not work for desktops and laptops. And the FIDO Alliance realized they needed to somehow blend the simplicity of U2F and the passwordless capability of UAF, and they merged the two together into FIDO2. And the JavaScript API that's necessary to build web and mobile applications for FIDO2, that got transitioned to the W3C and became the web authentication or WebAuthn protocol, as they call it, WebAuthn API, excuse me. So even though most of the websites that I named today are using U2F and FIDO is used as a second factor, I can almost guarantee everyone is going to transition to passwordless. And that's what FIDO Alliance just announced user experience guidelines. There's a white paper that they put out just last week. They even created a mock banking website called digitalbank-test.com. So you can go in right now, and if you've got a Windows 10 desktop laptop, if you've got a MacBook with Touch ID, if you've got an Android device or an iOS phone with current Chrome and Safari browsers respectively, you don't need anything else. You can register a passwordless authentication credential on the digital bank demo site, and you can see how it works right now.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of wealth of information what you just mentioned there. Let's talk a little bit about what this is actually solving. So, I mean, obviously, we see every so often in terms of days, password compromises, right? You see, hash dumps on passwords. Recently LinkedIn part two, we saw that in the news where you saw a major compromise of nearly all their global users. What we're saying here under no uncertain terms is the future of a passwordless specification that really dissolves the risk of these passwords or password hashes being dumped out, because we're going to a more is it more of a passwordless state, or are we really talking about just a sophisticated form of MFA? If I'm hearing you correctly, and for those that are out there hearing this, we're not talking about just MFA here. We're talking about passwordless state for our the future of applications and mobile web and then client devices, right?
Actually, it's more than passwordless, Tony. The number of benefits that FIDO2 WebAuthn deliver to consumers as well as companies that implement FIDO protocols on their web and mobile applications, they're called relying parties, by the way, in FIDO terminology. So you'll see me use relying parties or RPs, but it essentially is anyone that has built a FIDO-enabled web application. The benefits go far beyond passwordless. Yes, you are correct. Ideally, the goal is to get everybody to a passwordless authentication capability so that there are no secrets on the website anymore. No secrets in the web application for hackers to break down, nothing to sell in the underground anymore, because it all works based on public key cryptography, where the private key is with you, public key is registered with the website, and you are challenged in real time. And you not only have to prove that you have the private key, but you have to prove that you're in front of the computer uh, to authenticate into the website. Now, how did FIDO enable all this? They've actually built in capability into the protocol to eliminate password phishing completely. Google actually has written a peer-reviewed white paper where they implemented FIDO, and this is the second factor, mind you, not even the passwordless. They implemented internally for all their employees, and they documented their experience in the white paper that you can find on the internet. 100% of password phishing attacks failed, absolutely failed. So that's another benefit. The third benefit that FIDO delivers is privacy protection. The protocol was designed in such a way that it does not leak information. A digital certificate from the PKI world has a public key, but it has identification information associated with that public key. So if you find a digital certificate in the wild on the internet, it can tell you a lot about the individual or computer or website that owns that certificate. But if you find a FIDO public key in the wild, you have absolutely no idea who it belongs to. There's no identification information in the exchange between the user as the website. So this privacy guarantee carries itself all the way through, so that when you have a computer that's communicating with, let's say, a dozen websites and all of them are FIDO enabled, your computer actually has a dozen key pairs, one for each of the websites. And the beauty is the protocol is designed in such a way that none of the 1 dozen websites know whether the consumer has another FIDO credential on the computer or the authenticator for any of the other sites. They can only see their own credential. And if the consumer has it, they can use that credential to authenticate into the website. So it's not just passwordless, it's eliminating phishing, password phishing, and it's protecting the privacy of consumers.
All good, valuable insight there. I do want to play devil's advocate here a little bit. So, in talking to a lot of product developers, application developers, as part of what we do as a consulting firm, some of the when introduced the notion of like, hey, why don't you consider FIDO as a new specification for your mobile or product app? Some of the common thoughts is that you're just moving the secrecy of a centralized value like hashes or passwords from a central location, like when you authenticate to an application. You have a database full of hash passwords to validate the username and password and things like that. Are we just simply moving to a decentralized model to the client hardware device? And does that now place a new attack surface on the client hardware device and it really hinge on proper key management there? What do you say to those things?
That is absolutely correct, Tony. You are correct, but only you've got part of the story. You're correct that the centralized store of secrets is now distributed all over the internet. Every consumer carries their own secret. But the FIDO people, they designed in the right levels of security into the protocol capabilities so that authenticators can now be designed with secure elements, or they can work within trusted execution environments, or use things like the trusted platform module, which is present in every business desktop and laptop that's been manufactured for the last 7, 8 years, or maybe even a decade. And Microsoft, for example, they've been leveraging the TPM for many years, but starting with Windows 11, it becomes mandatory. If you don't have a TPM 2.0 on your desktop or laptop, you just can't install Windows 11. You can't even upgrade to Windows 11. So as a result, the security around that key management on the client side is high. And what FIDO Alliance has done is they've also created a certification program that allows manufacturers of authenticators to get certified and even add an optional security certification. So I'm sure many people listening to this conversation know about FIPS certification for cryptographic hardware. A FIPS certified FIDO authenticator is already available on the market today. You can buy them from multiple manufacturers, but and you can use these devices to protect the keys that you have. Now, of course, consumers still must own the responsibility of managing the physical security of the device, their mobile device or their computer. But if it's tied to a biometric device authentication, like your fingerprint or Face ID, you have an additional barrier that the attackers cannot compromise. So they put in a lot of thought into the design of the protocol and the API because they've learned from all the problems over the last 2 decades.
Well, I think it's clear when you have a huge industry shift, and we know that there's, the heavy hitters like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Google that are looking to adopt this specification pervasively within their products and applications. I think it's pretty telling about the effectiveness because oftentimes they're on the leading edge of putting certain specifications through the ringer and validating its efficacy. So as you talked about with the phishing attacks for password compromise being zero in that sort of concentrated example model that was depicted earlier. Just to wrap up, because I know we wanted to make this kind of short, dense, really about introduction to FIDO. How do people get started? What if you're talking to a development manager or product group? Where do people go? How easy is it to really flip the switch from an authentication model using your traditional username and passwords to baking this into your application or product?
Lots of places, Tony. That's the nice thing about getting into the FIDO ecosystem today. There has been so much work and development over the last 6-7 years that there's a rich amount of information. I haven't seen any FIDO 2 books yet, but I'm pretty sure something will come out soon enough. Although it may already be a little too late for a FIDO book because things are moving very, very rapidly. One of the best resources that I would get started with is a website called loginwithfido.com. It's a FIDO Alliance website, and it was designed to be not as technical as the specifications that you find on fidoalliance.org. If you're implementing a FIDO authenticator or a FIDO server, clearly the only place you need to go to is either fidoalliance.org or the W3C. But if you're going to be a relying party building web applications, get started with loginwithfido.com for a great introduction. Apple created one of the best explanations I have ever seen of FIDO2 WebAuthn on a video, and it's available from their WWDC announcement just 2 weeks ago. And this video for the first 20 minutes explains the protocol, how it works, and its security benefits. And Apple has done a great job, I think. They've even taken the implementation a little further to make it easier for their consumer base across the Apple ecosystem. So between loginwithfido.com and the Apple video, I don't think you can get a better introduction to FIDO itself. But if you're looking to develop a web application, there are tutorials all over. Search for WebAuthn tutorials or FIDO tutorials. And StrongKey itself has an open source FIDO certified server with tutorials that you can download from GitHub, SourceForge. More than happy to respond to questions. There's a fabulous mailing list called FIDO-dev at GitHub. people who want to learn more or who have questions on how to build applications or integrate with servers, authenticators, or any question at all, they're welcome to join the FIDO Dev mailing list and just post the question. W3C also has a community forum, but the questions there tend to get a little deeper around the JavaScript specification. So that's for a different group of people, but tons of resources if you just search for it.
That sounds good. No, I appreciate it, Arshad. Well, listen, it's always great to talk with you on these types of issues. For the audience out there, let's close out with just you know, a little bit about StrongKey, you know, so that they can get a little bit of perspective if they want more information. I know that our marketing groups will probably put underneath the links in LinkedIn, on YouTube, etc., on Twitter, some of the references that you just dished out so that people can easily get access to that. But just quickly in 30 seconds, what does StrongKey do?
StrongKey has been building appliances for data protection for the last 20 years, Tony. We began as StrongAuth. We are still legally known as StrongAuth Inc., which was all around PKI, passwordless authentication, believe it or not. I'm fortunate enough that in a single career, I'm seeing the same technology come back as FIDO, which is why I don't know if you'll find anyone being a more ardent supporter of the authentication capability. Everything we produce is open source. We help companies with PCI DSS compliance for encryption tokenization, PKI, and now FIDO. The interesting thing is in the European Union, there is a regulation called Payment Services Directive 2, where FIDO Alliance has probably one of the best white papers on how you can use FIDO to comply with PSD2 for strong customer authentication.
Well, I appreciate the time, Arshad. Everyone, this is CTO of StrongKey. Again, if you want more information on StrongKey, please visit strongkey.com. I'm Tony UV. I'm the CEO of VerSprite. We are a cybersecurity global consulting firm. We've had the pleasure of working with Arshad on numerous different authentication projects. We focus on application security, threat intelligence, security research, governance program management, and security operations through DevSecOps. Find more information on the links that will be provided along with this video broadcast. And Arshad, as always, it's a pleasure and look forward to the next time we can get together.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate the opportunity.